you know, they're not an entity. They believe they have 193 countries put it together, so that they have to, all those countries have to agree somehow. And so I want to ask you, do you think that it's possible that this bureaucracy could start to change its mentality, and start to believe themselves that they are an entity, that they have to believe in themselves as soon as they are in the job?
Thank you for an interesting question. Indeed, the idea of single term for Secretary General is not new, and it's in the book. It's in the book. The book proposed one single term, not of 7 years as sometimes it's done. I want it to be different. So it's 6 years term. It's enough for a period of administering the United Nations. The real power is not during the length of the term, really. Although this will help, because then they will not campaign for re-election, and they will feel a little bit more independent and act as they. But that's just a hope. We don't have any guarantee that any Secretary General elected for 7 or 6 year term, man or woman, will be truly independent. That's where the crux of the matter is. But an executive secretary, and that's why I put in the International Executive Secretary instead of Secretary General. By the way, some developing country, some ambassador from developing country once, I think, I wouldn't name the country, once said in the conference room, we need less of general, we need less of secretary, we need more of general. In other words, general, secretary general, secretary general. They want someone stronger, general. But my friend, it depends on the character and the personality of the individual. If we have strong characters such as Dag Hammarskjöld, they can do a lot despite the pressure.
He died.
That's why he died in the mission over Rhodesia. Wait a minute, just finish. That's why the Soviet Union said, instead of one Secretary General, and you may not know this because you are too young people here, they proposed that we have Troika, 3 Secretaries General, one from developing countries, one from Western countries, and one from Eastern Europe. I say that in the book. I say, had this formula been retained, it would have led to paralysis, just like with the veto. So what I'm saying is this. If we have strong, independent Secretary General in the type and the caliber of Dag Hammarskjöld, what would the Secretary General, you hear me sometimes ask question at the briefing, why doesn't the Secretary General invoke Article 99, called Good Offices article, to go before the Security Council and say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I think that there is a threatening situation in this region or in this country or this sub-region, and I want you to do something. The Secretary General has the power under the Charter, Article 99, to bring any situation that threatens international peace and security to the attention of Security Council. Some Secretaries General fulfill that function. They go to Security Council and they warn the Security Council and they push them to do something before the crisis or the conflict erupt. Others are reluctant to do that. But we have it already in the Charter. We have it in Article 99, the so-called good offices, whereby the Secretary General at any time can bring to the attention of Security Council any matter, any issue that in his or her opinion might threaten international peace and security. So that's one example where it makes a lot of difference. Nizar.
Thank you.
Push it up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Abbadi, for this very interesting briefing. You mentioned about the clout some countries exercise over the Secretary General. However, you did not touch on corruption at the United Nations and whether some departments of the United Nations use the United Nations for their own political ends. For example, last week we had the briefing about protection of civilians at the United here in Area Formula 4, and this was by all means banned from being broadcast. Also, there was another meeting organized at the same time so that it distracts attention to it. The briefing in the evening, it was not broadcast on EasyTV by audio, simply. In the past, we've seen many examples of that, such as when the Iranian ambassador is at the stakeout and the Israeli ambassador is speaking somewhere in the General Assembly or somewhere else, they would superimpose one on the other, negate that. When Bashar Jafar is speaking at the General Assembly, one time he was blocked out totally and the screen disappeared, and so many other instances. Can you remember any of such things happened in the past? We are new here, most of us are.
Absolutely, absolutely. I didn't deal with the question of corruption in the book, because otherwise it'll be 300 or 400 page book. But corruption, like every big organization, takes place. And I remember vividly throughout the history of the UN, where I have spent, as I said now, 48 years. Nobody spent 48 years under the roof without quitting the organization except me. Others have even joined the UN before me in 1947, but they come and go, or they retire and go. But I continuously, sorry about that. But throughout the years, corruption has been dealt with at the UN, or has been found at the UN. I'll give you just one example. I think it was in the 70s that at the level of Assistant Secretary General, by the way, if you want to know about the UN, and I mentioned the book in my book, there is a man, Assistant Secretary General of DPI. It was called different way at that time, from Latin America. And he saw so many things happening in this department that he got out and wrote a book called The Play Within the Play. It's about the United Nations. Nobody ever heard of that book, but check it.
The bookstore.
Someone really insists. It's the bookstore.
They change their mind.
The Play Within the Play. You will find it amusing, and it tells you the inside story of the UN. In the 70s, they found, for example, an Assistant Secretary General of Personnel. That's very critical, very strategic department in the United Nations, because it deals with all the personnel worldwide. They found out he was so corrupt, he was selling posts, you know, in the UN. He was recruiting someone who paid him thousands of dollars. So the Secretary General ordered an investigation. And some of you might recall one of my colleagues from Britain who was Under Secretary General, and he was director when I was working with him. And his name is Urquhart. You know Brian Urquhart. So he dealt with this corruption issue, and they investigated and found that indeed, you know, this gentleman, I wouldn't name the name or the country, was corrupt. And you know how they dealt with him? They quietly removed him. He had to leave the organization, and that was the end of it. That's not the way to deal with corruption. So there have been cases throughout the history of the UN, but which organization is devoid of corruption today? It's difficult to find anything that is not.
This brings the question about recruitment at the United Nations. This is a mystery. If you ask anyone how you have been recruited, he will not tell you. And you ask delegates or missions, they don't know how recruitment is happening at the United Nations. Transparency on recruitment is zilch, as they say.
Well, that is why I try to emphasize the word depoliticization of the Secretariat. If I tell you, do we have time for a story?
Yeah, you know, I was passing the mic for the
Sure.
next question.
I tell you a story, my own story. I was director in in a particular division of the political affairs division, and then we had a senior P5, I say that in the book, by the way, senior post, P5 recruit to that post. So the director gave me 20 files one Friday night to review and to propose the best candidates for the post, senior post, P5. That's the end of professional category, the P1, P2, 3, 4, 5. That's the end before director level. So I took them to my country home and I looked at these 30 files, spent Saturday and Sunday, and at the end I selected 3 candidates, 2 men and 1 woman, which I thought had the best experience, the most qualifications, the languages, I said the experience and the integrity, the letters of recommendation, etc. The best 3 candidates. So I came to my office on Monday following the weekend, and then my secretary came in my office and closed the door and said, Mr. Abbadi, you know the P5 post, the man is sitting next door to you. He's already recruited. I said, what? I haven't even finished the files, reading the files, and I haven't even submitted these candidates to the director to select from whoever he wants, 2 men, 1 woman. She said, well, they already. So I dashed into the director's office and I said, you gave me 20 files to review. I spent the entire weekend and I selected 3. Here they are. And now they tell me there is a recruitee already sitting. He said, yes, that's a fact. He already has an assignment. I barely could repress my anger, but I did. I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, can I say something? He said, yes, go ahead. Please, I said, don't ever give me the files to review on who is the best candidates next time. He said, it's okay. And then that was the end.
Gloria.
Why I tell you this story? Because in the book you will see a good deal about the recruitment and promotion. It has been perverted system. When I came here, no government was interfering in my recruitment. I came, and I say it in the book, one of my colleagues invited me to Delegates Lounge to have coffee, and he said, oh, you know your ambassador? He was walking by, the Moroccan ambassador. I said, no. So he presented me to him, and he said, how long you have been here? I said, 6 months. He said, and you haven't come to pay courtesy to the ambassador? I said, I will, Mr. Ambassador, and I did. Following a few weeks, I paid a courtesy visit. Why I tell you this story? Because the UN recruited directly independent candidates. I came directly from the university, was I teaching at the University of California in Berkeley. And they ask for the government's support after they recruit the candidate. Today, governments interfere even in the recruitment of secretaries. That's how bad this place has become, let alone about the promotion. I won't tell you the stories about it. So it is a big problem, recruitment and promotion, how to get people with integrity, with the sense of international civil servant, devoted entirely to the work. And the charter says it, no instruction from government, no instruction given to government. And I recall in 60s and 70s, I would say to the ambassadors from different countries, oh, you have many people, or you don't have enough nationals. Oh, in the Secretariat, they say, oh, no, 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 we don't interfere in the Secretariat. That's how they answered. That is gone. We have come to a stage, my friend, when the United Nations has to revamp itself, or it will know the fate of the League of Nations. That's where I differ with those who wrote about the United Nations. I say it clearly and unmistakably.
Gloria, no?
First, there are signs of decline of this organization. If it does not modify itself and innovate itself, not reform itself, we might see one day that it's going the wrong way and it would threaten its own future. Especially, and I emphasize this in the book too, because I deal with the future global society. What kind of world we are going to be in 20, 30, 40 years under the regime of global society. If the United Nations does not innovate when it gets into the global environment, which we are already getting into it, it will be too late for it to do anything to resuscitate itself. Too late. And you don't hear people talk like I do. But I say it because I saw the organization from inside as an insider and from outside as an advisor to delegations and as an academic. We are living very exciting years. The United Nations has now, the time for reforms is over. Ever. It will not work. So you have to revamp the organization or it will not work in the future.
Okay. Gloria, and we wrap it up.
I think you took part of the crown of Ban Ki-moon away on Timor-Leste. He has been crowing that that country is now very independent financially and extremely successful. So I know that he has said that's my big win here in the UN, Timor-Leste. But that's a trite point. My question to you now is, which fascinated me, because I'm a great friend of Morocco, and I found myself almost disturbed now to see a big push creating more conflict right now with this new romancing of the Polisario and going back over a situation that's been very, very quiet all these years. Other than, as we know, the king was not happy with the report of the Secretary General last year, which created some bad waves and was a hint. But now the Secretary General is flogging it. And my question is, where do you see a political motivation in this?
Thank you, Gloria. Gloria King is one journalist, has been with us for many, many years too, so she has a tremendous experience. When I was talking about Timor-Leste, I was talking about Kofi Annan. He did something for Timor-Leste independence, and he succeeded to a large extent in that field. This question you raised is outside of my scope, of course, because we are dealing with the book, not Western Sahara. But if I have to tell you about Western Sahara, I would just say something. It was unwise on the part of our Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to pronounce the word occupation regarding Morocco. Nobody ever mentioned that, especially the Security Council. And why he did that, I tell my friends when they ask me that question, I think we all know Ban Ki-moon. He's a very cautious man. I tell them, if you fill out this room with eggs and you ask him to walk, he will not break one single egg. And he is cautious. So how did suddenly go to the Polisario areas and to Algeria and take a very strong attitude against Morocco, especially by saying that it's an occupied land? I don't have any facts about that, but my own judgment is that he was badly advised, period.
Last question.
Last question.
Because you're Moroccan, okay? The microphone is there. Here.
Back to the question of independence. Based on your experience, do you think that some countries, or at least influential ones, want secretaries, pure and simple, instead of secretaries general? And on reform, you have been insisting on the need for reform in the United Nations. Is it up to the Secretary General himself, or to somebody else? Whose decision is it?
On reforms?
Yes.
I answered the second question first. The reforms of the Secretariat is both the realm of the institutional organs at the UN as well as Secretary General. Why? Because Secretary General reforms and then the Assembly dispose. You have to have a budget for whatever reforms you want, so you have to work together with the Assembly before you initiate any reforms, otherwise they will not be implemented. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the first question.
Based on your experience, do you think that some countries, or at least influential ones, want secretaries instead of secretaries general?
If they influence the Secretary General?
No, he wants only secretary instead of secretary general.
They want people who are not...
Just secretary.
Oh, no, I did say that...
Female secretary.
Especially the... By the way, we say the P5, those of you who are sophisticated have been here for a long time. We know that there are P5, right? Do you know that they are P4? Do you know that they are P3? Do you know that they are P2? And finally, there is a P1 too. I don't have to tell you who they are, but as I said,